The year is 451 A.D. On a vast, dusty plain in modern-day France, the fate of Western civilization hangs by a thread. Facing each other are two massive armies. On one side, the desperate remnants of the Western Roman Empire. On the other, a nightmare from the East. At the head of this nomadic war machine is Attila, the Scourge of God. If his army breaks the Roman lines today, the Western world will be plunged into an age of ash and ruin. But the man commanding the Roman defense, Flavius Aetius, knows exactly how to stop him. Because decades earlier, they had lived together in the same camp, to understand how the Roman Empire was pushed to the absolute brink of total annihilation, and the tactical masterclass that temporarily saved it, we have to rewind the clock and look at the map. By the early 5th century, the Roman Empire was a shadow of its former self. To manage its vast territories, it had been split in two. The wealthy, heavily fortified Eastern Roman Empire ruled from Constantinople, and the decaying Western Roman Empire ruled nominally from Ravenna. But a new geopolitical reality was shifting the borders of Europe. Out on the Eurasian steppe, a harsh, unforgiving sea of grass, a nomadic confederation was on the move. The Huns. We don't know exactly where they came from, but we know how they fought. Unlike the heavy infantry of Rome, the Hunnic military machine was built entirely around the horse and the composite bow. They could cover immense distances, strike without warning, and vanish before a traditional army could form up. As the Huns pushed westward, they displaced other barbarian tribes, Goths, Vandals, and Franks, shoving them violently across the Roman borders like a great demographic domino effect. In 434 A.D., two brothers took control of the Hunnic Empire, Bleda and Attila. By 445, Bleda was dead, likely murdered by Attila, leaving Attila as the sole ruler of the most terrifying military force on earth. Attila was not just a mindless barbarian. He was a shrewd geopolitical extortionist. He looked at the map of the divided Roman Empire and saw an ATM machine. He turned his sights first on the wealthy East. When Constantinople failed to pay the tribute he demanded, Attila unleashed his hordes into the Balkans. Entire cities were wiped from the map. The Eastern Emperor, desperate to save his capital, agreed to a humiliating treaty. 2,100 pounds of gold every single year. The gold flowed from the Mediterranean into the pockets of the Huns, fueling Attila's war machine. But eventually, the East bled dry. Attila needed a new target. He looked west. Attila needed a political justification to invade the West. In 450 A.D., he received a spectacular one. Honoria, the sister of the Western Roman Emperor, was furious that she was being forced into an arranged marriage. In a baffling act of treason, she smuggled a ring to Attila, begging him to rescue her. Attila chose to interpret this as a marriage proposal. He accepted, and demanded half of the Western Roman Empire as his dowry. When the emperor predictably refused, Attila had his casus belli. The invasion was on. But the Western Empire had one trump card left, a general named Flavius Aetius. Decades earlier, as a boy, Aetius had been sent to the Hunnic camps as a political hostage. He grew up among them. He learned how they rode, how they shot, and how they thought. He even knew Attila personally. Now, Aetius was the supreme commander of the Roman military. He was the only man alive who understood the Hunnic logistical machine well enough to break it. In the spring of 451 A.D., the map of Europe turned red. Attila crossed the Rhine River with an army estimated at 500,000 men. While ancient sources exaggerate, it was undeniably one of the largest coalitions ever assembled in antiquity. Huns subjected Ostrogoths, Gepids, and Heruli poured into Gaul, modern-day France. City after city fell. Metz was burned to the ground. The Huns moved with terrifying speed, employing psychological warfare to paralyze the defenders. Aetius knew the Roman army alone could not stop them. In a masterstroke of diplomacy, Aetius rode out to secure an alliance with Rome's bitter enemies, the Visigoths, led by King Theodoric. Theodoric knew that if the Romans fell, his people would be next. The blue banners of Rome and the banners of the Visigoths marched together, a desperate coalition rushing to intercept the Red Swarm. They caught Attila at the city of Orleans. The Huns were already inside the city, sacking it, when Aetius and Theodoric arrived. Caught in a disadvantageous position, Attila did something rare. He ordered a retreat. He pulled his massive army back to find open ground where his cavalry could maneuver. He found it at the Catalaunian Plains. Attila arranged his forces with himself and his elite Hunnic cavalry in the dead center. His subjected allies, the Ostrogoths, held the left flank. Aetius, understanding Hunnic psychology perfectly, deployed a brilliant counter-formation. He placed his weakest troops, the Alans, in the center, knowing Attila would charge them. He placed the Visigoths on the right, and his elite Roman heavy infantry on the left. The battlefield was dominated by a single, steep ridge. Both sides knew whoever held the high ground would dictate the battle. The Romans beat the Huns to the top of the ridge. When Attila's cavalry charged up the slope, they were met by a wall of Roman shields and a rain of pila, heavy javelins. The Huns were repulsed, taking heavy casualties. Infuriated, Attila launched a massive assault against the center. The Alans broke. The Huns poured through the gap. But Aetius had anticipated this. As the Huns pushed forward, the Romans on the left and the Visigoths on the right wheeled inward. It was a classic pincer movement. The hunters had become the hunted. In the chaos, King Theodoric of the Visigoths was thrown from his horse and trampled to death. But rather than breaking, the Visigoths were driven into a frenzy of vengeance. They smashed into the Hunnic flank. For the first time in his life, Attila realized he was going to lose. He ordered his army to fall back to their fortified wagon camp. The battle was a bloodbath. Tens of thousands lay dead on the plains. Aetius had done the impossible. He had stopped the Scourge of God. But, coldly calculating the future geopolitical map, Aetius allowed Attila to retreat. He knew if he completely destroyed the Huns, the Visigoths would become the new supreme threat to Rome. Attila was bloodied, but not broken. The next year, in 452 A.D., he bypassed Gaul entirely and drove straight into Italy. The Huns descended over the Alps. They laid siege to the great city of Aquileia. They destroyed it so utterly that the survivors fled into the coastal lagoons, eventually founding the city of Venice. The road to Rome was wide open, but Attila's army was suffering. Logistics were failing. Disease swept through his camps, and a famine in Italy meant there was no food to forage. At the Po River, Attila was met by an embassy sent by the emperor. Leading it was Pope Leo I. We don't know exactly what was said in that tent, but between the Pope's pleas, the raging disease, and an Eastern Roman army suddenly attacking his homeland in the rear, Attila agreed to turn back. He retreated to his stronghold on the Hungarian plains. He planned to regroup and strike again. But history had other plans. In 453 A.D., Attila took a new young bride. On his wedding night, following a massive feast, he suffered a severe nosebleed. Too intoxicated to wake up, he choked on his own blood. The most feared man in the world, who had survived the blades of the greatest empires, died silently in his sleep. Without Attila's terrifying charisma to hold it together, the Hunnic Empire collapsed almost immediately. His sons fought over the throne, and their subjugated tribes rose up in rebellion. But the damage to the map of Europe was permanent. Attila had pushed the Germanic tribes permanently into Roman territory. He had drained the east of its gold and the west of its manpower. Aetius, the hero of Chalons, was murdered by his own paranoid emperor just a year later. By 476 AD, a mere 23 years after Attila's death, the Western Roman Empire would officially fall. Attila didn't just win battles. He acted as the ultimate catalyst for the end of antiquity. He was the hammer that shattered the ancient world, clearing the board for the birth of medieval Europe.